I spent my whole life giving love, giving time, giving money, giving myself until one night. Over a table filled with food I paid for, I heard something that shattered me forever. This isn't just a story of humiliation. It's a story of waking up. If you've ever felt invisible in your own home, this is for you. I remember the clink of crystal glasses, the low hum of jazz floating through the house I paid for, the smell of the roast chicken I seasoned that morning slow cooking while I ran errands for a dinner I wasn't even supposed to be part of. But I stayed because Olivia forgot to mention her parents were coming over again. And the house needed to look perfect again. I should have known better. I should have known what was coming the moment her mother looked at me with those half-curious, half-condescending eyes and asked, "And you are?" Olivia didn't hesitate. "Oh," she said, laughing like it was the funniest thing she'd ever said. "That's Margaret, our unofficial maid. Keeps the house running." Everyone laughed. Even my son. I stood there holding the empty wine bottle I just brought up from the basement, smiling politely as if the floor hadn't disappeared beneath me, as if my heart wasn't breaking piece by piece. I excused myself, set the bottle on the counter, and walked to my bedroom. They kept laughing behind me. Not one of them, not my own son, said, "That's my mother." Not one of them said anything. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the door I'd painted myself years ago when we first moved in. I remembered signing the mortgage papers. My name, my credit, my down payment. Ethan had just graduated college. Olivia wasn't even in the picture. They had nothing. I gave them everything. And now I was the maid. The next morning, I made coffee like always. I fed the cat Olivia pretended to like. And when she came downstairs in her yoga outfit, too busy on her phone to even say good morning, I just stood there and waited. Eventually she looked up. I handed her the keys, all of them. "Front door, back door, garage, mailbox. What's this?" she asked, frowning. I smiled. "Good luck paying the mortgage now." She blinked. "What?" I walked past her down the hall, past the photos I framed, the furniture I chose, the walls I painted. I didn't take anything. Just my purse and the coat I wore the day I brought Ethan home from the hospital. I didn't say goodbye. I heard Ethan calling my name as I opened the door. I didn't stop. He ran after me, barefoot in the driveway, but I kept walking. I didn't slam the car door. I closed it gently, calmly, because something inside me had snapped. But not the way you'd think. It wasn't rage. It wasn't grief. It was clarity, and clarity is quiet. It doesn't scream. It doesn't beg. It just knows. And for the first time in my life, I knew I was done. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but I knew where I wasn't staying. The last thing I saw in the rearview mirror was Ethan standing in the driveway, stunned. He had no idea how much he'd just lost. And neither did I yet. They say you don't realize you were drowning until you finally breathed. That first night in the tiny apartment my great Aunt Ruth left me, it didn't feel like freedom. Not yet. It was silence, thick, echoing silence that settled like dust. The apartment smelled like time. Old floorboards, yellowed wallpaper, a heater that groaned like it remembered better decades. I dropped my bag on the kitchen table and stood there, unsure whether to cry or laugh. I did neither. I just stared at the chipped tiles, thinking about the home I had walked away from. But it wasn't a home anymore, not for me. Over the next few days, I moved like a ghost. I slept on the couch because the bed frame in the bedroom was broken. I ate peanut butter sandwiches and microwaved soup. I didn't call anyone. Not because I had no one, but because no one had called me. Ethan didn't text. Didn't email. Not a single word. I guess Olivia told him not to. Or maybe worse, maybe he just didn't care. I kept replaying that dinner in my mind. The way they laughed, the way he laughed. I raised that boy alone after my ex-husband left. I gave up my career, my plans, my entire self. I cleaned motel rooms at night and stocked groceries at dawn just to keep a roof over our heads. And when my parents passed and left me that insurance money, I used all of it to buy a house, a home. I never asked him for rent. Never made him pay a dime. And somehow, in Olivia's world, I had become the help. At night, I started writing in old spiral notebooks, the same kind I used to buy for Ethan in middle school. I filled page after page, not for anyone to read, just for me. I wrote things I had never said out loud. I wrote about standing in the kitchen waiting for him to say thank you. About crying in the garage when they went out to dinner without inviting me. About pretending to be asleep so I wouldn't hear them mocking my TV shows in the living room. I paid for . And then one day, while looking for a light bulb in the upstairs storage closet, I found the old metal trunk Ruth used to keep under her sewing machine. Heavy, rusted. I pried it open expecting thread and buttons. Instead, I found envelopes. Dozens of them. And one in particular changed everything. It was addressed to me in Ruth's familiar handwriting. Dated almost 3 decades ago. If you're reading this, it means you've come back. And I'm sorry you had to. My heart pounded as I unfolded the pages. They were yellowed, fragile. Inside were copies of hospital forms, notes, and a single photograph of a newborn. Wrapped in a hospital blanket, not Ethan, the name under. It read Michael Jameson. I read the letter 3 times before it made sense. Ruth had been a nurse at the hospital where Ethan was born. She wrote that she had always had doubts. She'd noticed something strange in the nursery the night I gave birth, a last-minute room switch. Confusion with the tags. But by the time she raised the issue, it was too late. The babies had already gone home. She never told me. She said she was afraid. She said she hoped she was wrong. But years later, she found a document buried in her files, a quiet settlement from the hospital to another family. And that's when she knew Ethan wasn't my son. My hands trembled. I thought I might pass out. I stared at the photo, at the name Michael Jameson. My mind refused to process it. Because if this was true, then who was Ethan? Who was I to him? And then something strange happened. I didn't feel grief. I didn't feel rage. I felt free, not because I didn't love Ethan, but because suddenly, all those years of pain, of feeling like a stranger in my own life, finally made sense. Maybe the coldness I always felt from him wasn't imagined. Maybe he always felt like a stranger because, deep down, he was. And maybe I wasn't crazy after all. I spent the rest of the night going through every paper in that trunk. Ruth had kept it all: DNA reports, affidavits, a small article about the Jameson family. They were successful, educated, local, and still living in the same town. My real son had grown up just a few miles away. I folded the letters, put them in a new envelope, and placed it in my nightstand drawer. Then I looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. I didn't recognize the woman staring back. But for the first time in a long while, I wasn't ashamed of her. She was broken, yes, but she was waking up. And the world had no idea what that meant yet. There's a kind of silence that isn't peaceful, it's punishing. That was the silence I lived in for weeks after reading Aunt Ruth's letter. I didn't know what to do with the information. I carried it inside me like a live wire, dangerous to touch, impossible to ignore. I didn't reach out to Ethan. I didn't go looking for Michael. I just existed. Each day, I woke up, made a single cup of coffee, stared out the dusty kitchen window, and tried to understand who I was now. The Margaret who raised Ethan wasn't the same woman who read those letters. That Margaret had been a mother, a wife once, a caregiver, a giver of everything. But without that identity, who was I? One evening, the heater went out in the apartment. I lit a candle and bundled myself in blankets. Curling up on the couch with the hospital files in my lap. I must have read them 100 times. Every line, every signature, every timestamp, they all checked out. It was real. My real son, Michael Jameson, had been born the same night as Ethan, in the same wing of a hospital that later quietly settled with another family. Hoping the truth would never surface, Ruth had made copies of everything before she passed. She left me the pieces of a truth that had been stolen from me. I felt grief, but not for Ethan. I grieved the time, the moments I should have had with Michael, birthday parties, first days of school, scraped knees, science projects, all the things I thought I was doing for my child. Those moments were meant for someone else, and yet, I didn't feel hatred toward Ethan. My love for him had never been biological. It had been unconditional. Or so I thought. But when someone you raise doesn't defend you, doesn't even see you, it forces you to reevaluate everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I finally pulled myself together. I had been hiding too long. I wasn't ready to confront Ethan, not yet. But I could start somewhere. Somewhere small. Somewhere quiet. I walked into town and stood across the street from the little bookstore near Main and Elm. Jameson's Books, painted deep green, with hand-lettered signs in the windows. I'd passed it dozens of times and never noticed. He was there, Michael. I didn't need to ask. He looked about 30, maybe a bit older, clean-cut, reading glasses. He was helping a young woman find a poetry book. His voice was soft, patient. His posture was gentle but sure of himself. I stood across the street, heart pounding. Eyes locked on the son I never knew, and I cried right there on the sidewalk. Not sobbing, not loudly, just quiet. Unstoppable tears that slipped down my cheeks and into the collar of my coat. I didn't go in. Not that day. I just watched. And then I did it again the next day. And the next. It became a ritual. I'd walk the block, sit on the bench near the corner, pretend to check my phone or sip coffee from a paper cup. And I'd watch Michael living the life I was never part of. It wasn't stalking. It was mourning and preparation, because slowly, I was starting to piece things together. While I sat outside that bookstore, I noticed everything. The delivery schedule, the names of customers, the rhythm of the store. I was observing, yes, but not just him. Them, Ethan and Olivia. I started tracking them too, quietly. I knew their patterns from memory. And Olivia loved social media, posting brunch spots, yoga studios, wine tastings. The trail was easy to follow, and what I saw made me sick. They weren't struggling. They were pretending. Olivia's business, some lifestyle coaching brand, was mostly smoke and mirrors. Rented office space, paid followers, maxed out credit cards to protect an image. And Ethan? He had quit his job 6 months ago. Olivia called it manifesting a new chapter. I called it delusion. They were building a house of cards. And they had no idea the wind was coming. I didn't tell anyone what I knew. Not yet. Instead, I started keeping a second journal. Not like the first one filled with emotions. This one was strategic. Dates, names, business filings, public records. I wasn't just grieving anymore. I was planning. They thought I was gone, invisible, irrelevant, but I was more present than ever. And I was going to remind them exactly who I was, the first time I saw Michael up close. I couldn't speak. It was a rainy Thursday. The bookstore was nearly empty, and he was restocking the biography section, humming under his breath. I had lingered outside too long, and when he turned and looked through the front window, our eyes met. He gave me a polite, welcoming smile, nothing more. Just a simple kindness you offer a stranger, and that's what I was to him. A stranger. My heart clenched. I turned away quickly, pretending to check my phone, but my hands were shaking too badly to fake it. I walked fast, ducking around the corner, barely making it to the car before the tears came. How do you tell someone their entire life began with a mistake? How do you look a grown man in the eye and say, "You're not who you think you are, and neither am I"? I went home, pulled out Ruth's letter again, and read it 3 more times. She hadn't just discovered the truth, she had investigated it. The name Michael Jameson wasn't a guess. It was confirmed. She had found the settlement papers. The hospital never told me because I was never meant to know. And the Jamesons, they must have known something. Maybe not everything, but enough to accept a quiet payout. But I wasn't here for revenge against them. I wasn't even sure what I was here for. I just wanted to know him, to see if the ache in my chest could be filled by the reality of who he was. So I went back. I started small. I bought a book. Michael rang it up himself. "Good choice," he said with a smile. Hard to find these days. His voice was warm, familiar in a way that made my throat tighten. He handed me the bag, his fingers brushing mine for a second. I nodded. "You own this place?" I asked. "Sort of," he said. "My parents helped me get started. They're retired now, so I keep busy here." Of course they helped. Of course he had support, not like Ethan, who'd had nothing but my blood, sweat, and sacrifice, and who turned around and offered me up as a joke. Michael had parents, but not me. And Ethan had me, but never wanted what I gave. The universe had scrambled the puzzle and left us all bleeding over the wrong pieces. I started visiting the bookstore every few days, casually. Sometimes I bought a novel. Sometimes I just browsed. Michael began to recognize me. "Back again," he'd say with that easy smile. We made small talk, weather, books, local events. I never told him my name, not yet. It wasn't time. Meanwhile, back in the shadows of my old life, things were shifting. Ethan sent me one message: "Mom, are you okay?" That was it. After 3 weeks of silence, that's all he had to say. I didn't reply. I had nothing left to give, but I started looking deeper into their world. I pulled up the deed to the house. Still in my name. Olivia had tried to refinance without my permission, denied. She couldn't afford the mortgage. Ethan had no income. I could have evicted them on the spot, but that would have been too easy. No, I wanted them to feel the slow unraveling, the fear. The realization that the foundation they stood on wasn't just fragile. It belonged to someone else entirely, me. Every night I wrote. My new journal was meticulous. Every receipt, every conversation, every time Michael mentioned a hobby, a favorite author, a childhood memory, I wrote it down. Not to use against him, but to understand the son I never got to raise. And between all the lines, the truth started rising to the surface. Ethan didn't treat me poorly because he was switched at birth. He treated me poorly because he chose to. Because Olivia gave him permission. Because somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing me as someone worthy of respect and started seeing me as someone to dismiss. But Michael, he didn't know me at all. And yet he treated me with more kindness in 5 minutes than Ethan had in 5 years. I wasn't ready to tell him. Not yet, but I was close. And when the time came, I wouldn't just tell him who I was. I'd tell him everything about the hospital, about the switch, about the life stolen from us both. But first, I had to finish watching the collapse of the life I'd already left behind. Because once the final piece fell, I wouldn't be looking back. I never planned to become a shadow in my own story. But sometimes the only way to see people clearly is to step out of the light. After that day in the bookstore, something shifted inside me. Not suddenly, but like a slow sunrise creeping across a frozen field, quiet and inescapable. I didn't rush anything. I wasn't just trying to reconnect with a son I never knew. I was trying to reclaim myself. I walked a little taller. I spoke a little stronger. I bought a second-hand laptop and began typing my notes into files, evidence, timelines, names. This wasn't a diary anymore. It was strategy, survival. And one thing became crystal clear. Ethan and Olivia's world was held together by duct tape and lies. The house they lived in, my house, was still under my name. Olivia's lifestyle business, Olivia Ascends, was a fabricated empire. Fake clients, fake testimonials. A brand built on buzzwords and filters. Sold from behind the wheel of a leased luxury car she couldn't afford. I found the LLC paperwork online. Checked tax records. Looked up business reviews. Every post she made was curated. Every event they attended was a photo op. And behind it all was debt. So much debt. Maxed out cards, a defaulted private loan. Ethan's student debt still unpaid. They were drowning under a mountain of bills, but too proud or maybe too arrogant to admit it. That's when I realized that if I pulled just one string, everything would fall apart. But I didn't, not yet. Because I had one more step to take first. Michael, I kept visiting the bookstore. And he still didn't know who I was. But each interaction chipped away at my fear. We talked about books, about life, about small things, TV shows, good coffee, city noise. Once, we sat at the tiny cafe next door, and he told me how he had almost become a teacher. But his love for books pulled him into business instead. You remind me of someone, he said once. Sipping his tea. Someone I can't place, I smiled. Maybe a librarian, he laughed. Maybe. That moment stayed with me for days. I didn't just like him. I recognized him not from the file I read or the photo Ruth gave me, but in the way he treated people, in the way he listened, in the quiet strength he carried. It felt like mine. I saw it in his posture, in his calm, in his presence. I started dreaming about a different life. One where I had raised him. Where we baked cookies in the kitchen. Where I drove him to soccer games and cheered from the sidelines. I could picture it so clearly that it made my chest ache. But I couldn't go back. So I planned for what came next. The first thing I did was call a lawyer. Not for revenge, for justice. I wanted the house sold. I had every legal right to it. I made the down payment, I paid every bill, and I had never signed it over. Ethan always said, we'll put it in your name later. No rush. Of course there was no rush for him. I was paying for everything. Now, I wanted my name back, my rights, my home. If not physically, then legally. I met with an attorney downtown, a woman around my age. Sharp and direct. She listened without judgment. When I told her what had happened, she nodded slowly and said, we'll file the motion this week. I signed the papers with a steady hand. That evening, I walked past the house. The porch light was on. Olivia sat on the swing, scrolling through her phone with a glass of wine in her hand. Inside, Ethan was on the couch playing video games. Their lives were on autopilot, with no idea that the ground beneath them was already shifting. It wasn't about punishing them. It was about restoring balance. And when the house sold, they would finally feel what I had felt for years, powerless. And maybe, just maybe, they'd understand what it meant to be discarded. I didn't slam doors. I didn't scream. I just watched, waited, and walked away. The first domino had fallen, and none of them knew it yet. I've always believed that silence is stronger than noise. That real strength isn't in how loud you fight, but in how deeply you know you're right. The day the official notice went out to Ethan and Olivia, I was sitting at a cafe near the courthouse, stirring honey into my tea with a calm I hadn't felt in years. My lawyer said they'd receive it by 9 a.m. My phone buzzed. Ethan. I stared at the screen until it stopped ringing, then turned it over and let the silence speak for me. It wasn't that I didn't want to hear his voice, I just wasn't ready to hear him lie. Later that afternoon, I checked my email and saw his message. It wasn't long. Mom, what are you doing? Please call me. Olivia is freaking out. Of course she was. The mortgage was due, and now they couldn't refinance. Because the person they thought was too weak to matter was the one holding the deed. They never saw it coming. A week later, I got another call. Olivia this time. I didn't answer her either. She left a voicemail, her tone tight, barely controlled. Margaret, we really need to talk. This is all just. It's a misunderstanding. Ethan says you're going through something, and we're here to support you. But you're putting our lives at risk, and that's not fair. I listened twice. She called the house hers. And my silence became sharper, more deliberate. They didn't understand yet. But they would. 2 days later, Ethan showed up at my apartment. I saw him through the peephole before he even knocked, hair uncombed, dark circles under his eyes. A man coming undone. I didn't open the door. He stood there a long time, knocked once, then again, and finally said, Mom, please don't do this. I stood on the other side with my hand on the knob, but I didn't turn it. I let him sit in the discomfort of being unheard, just like I had for years. The following week, my lawyer finalized the paperwork to list the house. I would get the full profit. Every cent, legally, ethically, emotionally, it was all mine. Olivia tried to fight it. She claimed contribution of value. My lawyer smiled and said, "Let's see her prove it in court." She couldn't because she never invested in anything except appearances. And now those were crumbling, one filter at a time. Word got out. Olivia's parents stopped commenting on her social media posts. Clients backed out. She made a video trying to explain the unfairness of generational property law. People saw right through it. And me? I didn't post a thing. I just kept showing up at Michael's bookstore. We had coffee again and talked about an old novel we both loved. He recommended a memoir to me. "It's about grief," he said, "but also forgiveness." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I think you'd like it," he added. "Maybe I would," I said. But not yet. I wasn't done grieving or forgiving. At home, I started boxing up old photos, pictures of Ethan as a baby, school portraits, birthday parties where I did all the work and got none of the credit. I didn't throw them away, but I put them aside. Because the woman who had spent her whole life giving everything was gone. And the woman who took her place wasn't angry. She was awake. The papers were signed. The house was going on the market. And somewhere inside that green bookstore across town, my real son was laughing at something a customer said, completely unaware that his life was about to change too, but in the best way. Because not all losses are tragedies. Some are beginnings in disguise. I used to think masks were just for costume parties. But Olivia wore hers like a second skin, flawless, smiling, unshakable. She always knew how to pose, how to angle her voice just right. But the thing about masks is that eventually they crack. And I was about to shatter hers completely. The idea came to me one morning while browsing the local business directory. I had already gathered enough personal dirt: credit problems, fraudulent Instagram partnerships, late mortgage payments. But I wanted more than rumors. I wanted facts. Something concrete. Something they couldn't spin. So I hired a local business consultant, a man named Darren. Quiet, professional, discreet. I told him I needed a full audit of a business. Nothing illegal, just a private deep dive into its structure. I gave him the name, Olivia Ascends LLC. He got to work. A week later, he delivered everything in a neat folder. And what he found, even I wasn't prepared for. Olivia's entire business model was a lie. No tax filings for the last 2 quarters. Several invoices forged to look like they came from real clients, except the clients didn't exist. Photo shoots staged at rented properties she claimed were home makeovers. Her so-called partnerships were just affiliate links with inflated metrics. She wasn't just pretending to be successful. She was deceiving everyone. I asked Darren, would this hold up under scrutiny? He looked at me and said, "If this goes public, she's finished financially, professionally." And that's when I made a decision. I printed everything. Then I found the address of Olivia's parents, the same people who once laughed in my home, clinking wine glasses while their daughter humiliated me in my own kitchen. I mailed them the file anonymously. No letter, no signature, just a note on top that read, "Everything you think you know is a performance." 2 days later, the first cracks appeared. Olivia's Instagram went quiet. No stories, no curated morning routines. Her newest post, an inspirational quote about being misunderstood, was flooded with strange comments. Then the dominoes fell. Her website went offline for maintenance. Her next workshop was canceled due to unforeseen circumstances. And then I heard the cherry on top from an old neighbor who still followed her. Olivia's mother was seen leaving her house in a rage, shouting into her phone, face red, purse swinging wildly. Whatever happened behind those doors wasn't filtered. And it sure wasn't pretty. Ethan called me again that night. I didn't answer. He left another voicemail. "Mom, I don't know what's happening. Olivia's parents aren't speaking to us. Someone sent them stuffed documents. They think we forged them. Did you do this?" I didn't reply. He was finally seeing her for who she was. And seeing himself, too. He had spent years defending a woman who destroyed everything in her path, starting with me. Let him feel it. Let him sit in it. That night, I walked to the bookstore again. Michael was closing up. He waved when he saw me. "Back again," he said, unlocking the door to let me in. "You should just work here at this point." I smiled. Maybe I should. We sat on the floor surrounded by stacked paperbacks. He was cataloging a new shipment. I helped without being asked. "Why do you come here?" He asked, not unkindly. The question caught me off guard. I looked at him. Really? I looked at him. He had my eyes. I hadn't noticed before. "I like the way it feels in here," I said. "Like nothing's pretending to be something it's not." He tilted his head, considering me. Me too. We worked in silence after that. No small talk, no more questions. But in that quiet, something settled between us. Not truth, not yet. But something close. A thread connecting us. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a ghost in someone else's life. I felt seen. And the woman who once stood invisible in her own kitchen, she was gone. In her place stood someone they never expected, someone they never should have underestimated. I used to think heartbreak came in one big blow, like a car crash or a door slamming shut. But it's not like that. Not always. Sometimes it comes slowly, like water leaking through a roof, drip by drip. Until one day the whole ceiling collapses, and he was finally standing under the flood. The news had reached him by then. The house was officially listed. Olivia's mask had crumbled, her business exposed, her reputation unraveling. And with nowhere else to point the blame, Ethan did what he always did. He came running to me. I heard the knock before I saw him. It was a quiet afternoon. I was finishing a cup of tea when the sound echoed through the apartment, 3 soft raps, hesitant. Like someone unsure whether they'd be welcomed or shut out. I opened the door slowly. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, unshaven, thinner, shirt wrinkled. Like he pulled it off the floor. "Mom," he said, voice cracked. "Can I come in?" I didn't answer. I just stepped aside. He walked in and stood in the middle of the room like he didn't know what to do with his body. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, he broke. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "To us?" I almost laughed. "Us?" As if there had been an us in years. I sat down in the armchair across from him, calm and composed. "I'm not doing anything to you, Ethan. I'm doing something for me." His jaw clenched. "You're selling the house." "My house, I grew up there." "And you gave it away." "I didn't give anything away," I said, voice low. "You let your wife turn me into your maid. You watched it happen. You laughed. You never even apologized." He didn't deny it. Just stared at the floor. "I thought you were just being dramatic," he mumbled. "I didn't know it hurt you like that." I stared at him. "That's the problem, Ethan. You never bothered to know what hurt me. You just assumed I'd always be there cleaning up after you, paying your bills, nodding along while you let that woman chip away at who I was." He flinched. "Olivia's not who I thought she was. That's not news to me." He finally looked up at me. His eyes were glassy now. "I lost everything." I didn't blink. "No, you gave it away." Silence stretched between us. "I miss you," he whispered. I sat up straighter. "I raised you," I said. "Fed you, clothed you, sacrificed for you, and you let me be humiliated in the house I bought." His lip trembled. "I thought she was helping me. I thought we were building something." "You built a lie," I said. "And now it's falling apart." He stood then, pacing the room. "So that's it? You just walk away?" I got up, walked to the drawer by the kitchen, and pulled out the envelope Ruth left me. I held it in my hands. "I'm going to tell you something now," I said. "And I need you to listen." "Really listen?" He nodded, confused. I handed him the envelope. "These are your birth records. Read them." He sat down and opened it slowly. His brow furrowed, then dropped. He read the letter, the hospital files, the DNA test Ruth had quietly ordered after all those years. He looked up at me, eyes wide. This can't be real." "It is. You're saying I'm not your son?" "I'm saying you weren't born to me. But I raised you as if you were. I gave you every piece of me even when you didn't want it." He went pale. "So who's your real son?" I didn't answer. He sat there, shell-shocked, mouth open, pages trembling in his hands. "I don't know who I am anymore," he whispered. "Now you know how I felt," I said. For years, he didn't cry, not really. But something in him broke. And I saw it happen. Not with anger. Not with satisfaction. Just peace. Because I finally said what needed to be said. I walked him to the door. He turned, eyes pleading. "Can we fix this?" I met his gaze. "I don't know," I said. "But it's not my job to try anymore." And I closed the door gently behind him, not out of spite, but out of finality. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one holding it open. It took me 3 days to figure out how I was going to do it. I practiced the conversation in the mirror in my car, even while standing in line at the grocery store with a basket of oranges in my hand, whispering sentences I could barely finish. "I'm your mother. There was a mistake. You've lived a life that wasn't meant to be yours. And so have I." None of it sounded right. How do you drop a truth like that into someone's life and expect them to survive the impact? But I had to try. Michael was in the bookstore, like always. The light inside streamed through the windows in soft golden beams, painting the shelves and scattering shadows across the hardwood floor. The whole place felt sacred, like a place where truth belonged. When he looked up and smiled at me, I almost turned around and left. "But I didn't." "Hey," he said. "You came at the right time. We just got a new batch of rare poetry editions." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Actually," I said, I came to talk." He studied me for a moment, sensing something in my voice. "Sure, come on back." He led me through a side door into a tiny break room, a kettle on the counter, a mismatched couch, a chipped table. Real life, no filters. We sat down. "I've been coming here for a reason," I started. Twisting my hands together, "I figured," he said softly. "You have? You're not exactly here for the books." I let out a small, sad laugh. "No, I'm not." Then I placed the envelope, Ruth's letter, the birth records. The DNA proof on the table between us. What's this? He asked carefully. Something that's going to change everything. He looked at me, waiting. 30-some years ago, I said, my voice cracking. There was a mistake at the hospital. To baby switched at birth, his eyebrows knit together. Confusion spreading across his face. My son, I said, was given to another family. He went completely still, and theirs, I continued, was given to me. He didn't speak for a long moment. I raised him, I said. Loved him with everything I had. But he didn't love me back. Not really. His eyes searched mine, slowly assembling the pieces I hadn't spoken aloud. You think I know you are. He looked down at the envelope and picked it up with trembling hands. Inside were the documents, the timeline, the explanation, Ruth's quiet confession. He read in silence. Every second felt endless. When he finished, he didn't look at me right away. He set the papers down, his fingertips still touching them like he needed something solid to hold. This is a lot, he finally said. I know, and you're Margaret? Yes, he looked up, his eyes glassy. I don't feel anything. Not yet, you don't have to, I said. I'm not here to ask for a place in your life. I just wanted you to know. I needed you to know, he nodded slowly. Why now? Because I couldn't live with the silence anymore. Because the truth deserved to breathe. He leaned back, exhaling hard. I have parents. They raised me well, I know, I love them. I would never ask you not to. We sat in that tiny room surrounded by books and the smell of old pages and peppermint tea. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. Not joy, not closure, just the freedom of no longer carrying something so heavy by myself. He stood after a while, pacing. I don't know what to do with this, he admitted. I don't either. But I don't hate you. Tears filled my eyes. That's more than I expected. He turned back to me. You didn't have to come. But you did. I didn't know how not to, I said. He nodded. A quiet understanding settling between us. Can we take it slow, he asked. I don't want to make this something it's not. I wouldn't ask for anything else. He gave me a faint, almost fragile smile. You want to stay for tea? I smiled back. I'd love to. We didn't talk about the files again that afternoon. We talked about books, the weather, how he hated the sound of wind chimes but loved the rain. And even though the past sat between us raw and unopened, we had started something. Not a relationship, not yet. But maybe, just maybe, a beginning. By the time autumn rolled in, the leaves weren't the only things changing. The house sold faster than I expected. I got the full asking price, more than I ever imagined. Ethan and Olivia had to vacate within 30 days. No extensions. No renegotiations. I didn't evict them out of anger. I evicted them out of necessity because that house had been my prison for far too long. And watching them pack up their curated life, box by box, knowing every pillow, plant, and designer trinket had been bought on borrowed time, it felt like watching a theater set being dismantled. The play was over. The illusion gone. The day the moving truck came, I drove past. I didn't stop. I just watched from a distance as Olivia barked orders at the movers, her sunglasses hiding whatever pride she had left. Ethan stood on the lawn with his phone pressed to his ear, pacing in circles. I wondered if he ever thought he'd see this day. I wondered if he knew I would be the one to bring it. Their fall wasn't dramatic. No screaming matches, no scandals on the local news. But it was complete. Olivia's parents pulled their financial support. Her business lost every major sponsorship. Her brand, once pristine, became something people whispered about in corners of town. The woman who once laughed at me in my own kitchen couldn't even afford her overpriced skincare line or her daily matcha anymore. Ethan tried to get a job. Any job. But with no degree, no references, no real experience, nothing opened for him. He moved into a small apartment on the outskirts of town. I heard this from the lawyer. I didn't ask. But I didn't celebrate either, because this wasn't about revenge. It was about truth, consequences, reality finally catching up. Meanwhile, my own life was quietly becoming something new. Michael and I kept meeting, casual things, coffee, talks about books, articles we shared, little comments about life. Once he asked about my writing and I told him I'd started working on a memoir, that I had a story to tell even if it never saw the light of day. He said, you should. Stories like that matter. He still didn't call me mom, and I never expected him to. That wasn't the point. We were building something not out of obligation but out of choice. That made all the difference. One afternoon, we walked through the farmer's market together. He picked up a jar of apple butter and laughed. My mom used to make this every fall. And the way he said my mom, it didn't sting. It felt okay, natural, right? Because he had a mother. And I had a son who didn't see me until it was too late. Some nights I sat alone with my tea and wondered if Ethan was sleeping on a mattress or on the floor. If Olivia still wore her silk robes. If they looked at each other now and finally saw all the things they ignored before. I didn't miss them. I missed the idea of what we were supposed to be, but grief like that is a shadow. It fades slowly. And pride grows in its place, especially when you finally learn to love yourself more than you love their approval. I walked through my old neighborhood one last time before the sale closed, not to haunt it, just to say goodbye. I passed the school Ethan once attended, the park where I pushed him on the swings, the grocery store where I counted coupons to buy his favorite cereal, and I let it all go. Because I had given everything to a family that never gave back. And now I was giving to someone who might never call me mom, but still looked at me with kindness, curiosity, respect. Sometimes you don't need redemption. You just need peace. And I was finally starting to feel it. It was early November when I got the text from Ethan. Just one line, "Can we meet?" Just once. I stared at it for a long time. It had been weeks since I'd last seen him. Weeks of silence, distance, heavy enough to feel like another kind of grief. But something in the tone wasn't angry or desperate or accusing. It sounded like surrender. We met at a small park on the edge of town. The kind with rusted benches and a trail looping around a dried-up pond. I picked the spot because it was neutral. No memories. No ghosts. He was already there when I arrived, sitting on a bench with his hands clasped between his knees. When he looked up, for a moment he reminded me of the boy he used to be, awkward, unsure, waiting for direction. I sat down beside him, careful not to sit too close. He cleared his throat. "I'm not here to ask for anything," he said. I nodded, staying quiet. I wanted to understand. I reached into my bag and pulled out the manila envelope again, the one with Ruth's letter. The documents, the DNA results. I handed the envelope to him without saying anything. He didn't open it, just held it in his lap like he'd already read it 1,000 times. "I did a test of my own," he said quietly. "After you told me." "Same result." I nodded. "I spent weeks trying to figure out what to do with it," he went on. "And I kept thinking, if I wasn't your son, then what was I?" I looked at him, then really looked at him, and said softly, "You were my child. But I treated you like—" "I know how I treated you," he cut in, wincing. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he added quickly. "I don't deserve it." "You don't," I said plainly. "But that doesn't mean I hate you." He turned toward me, eyes wet. "Then what does it mean?" "It means I finally love myself more than I love the idea of you." The silence that settled after that was heavy but not cruel. He bowed his head. I thought I was protecting Olivia, standing by her. But I was just hiding behind her, wasn't I? "You let her rewrite the story," I said. "And you handed her the pen." He nodded slowly. "I wish I could undo it." "You can't." We sat there for a while, two people who had shared a life built on a mistake, unraveling it in the cold November air. Then he said something I didn't expect. "I hope he's good to you." I blinked, surprised. "Who?" "Michael," he said softly. "Your son." A breath caught in my throat. "He's kind," I said. "Gentle." He gave a faint smile. "I guess some of that came from you then." We both laughed, tired, soft, not joyful. "But not bitter either." "I don't want to be in your life if it hurts you," he said finally. "But if there's ever a place for me, just a corner of it." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. I stood and looked out at the pond. Leaves drifted across the surface like ashes. "I'll think about it," I said. He nodded. "That's more than I hoped for." As I turned to leave, I placed a hand on his shoulder for just a moment. And that was it. The final moment, not closure, but understanding. And somehow, that was enough. Because I didn't need to fix him anymore. I didn't need to be fixed either. I just needed to be free, and I was. I really, truly was. I used to think the word freedom sounded too big, too grand, something meant for speeches or parades. Not something someone like me could actually live. But when I turned the key in the front door of Michael's bookstore that morning, I finally understood what it meant. He'd called me the night before, said he had something to show me. His voice was casual, but there was something underneath it, something warm, steady, waiting. I walked in and saw him standing by the back wall where a new wooden sign hung above an arched doorway. The sign read, "The Next Chapter." I smiled. "What's this?" He handed me a small brass key, simple, polished, warm from his hand. "It's a new section I'm opening," he said. "A cozy reading space. Coffee corner. Community talks." I wanted it to feel like more than just a store. I wanted it to feel like belonging. I turned the key over in my hand. "And you want me to open it?" He looked at me, serious now. "I want you to have it." I stared at him, stunned. He went on, voice soft. "You gave someone your whole life. They treated you like furniture, like background. But I see you. I don't need you to prove anything to me. You've already done enough." Tears welled in my eyes. I blinked them back. "You don't have to do this," I whispered. "I know," he said. "But I want to." I walked toward the doorway beneath the sign and slid the key into the lock. It turned easily. Inside, warm light poured through tall windows. Shelves lined the walls, already half stocked with classics and memoirs. A rug in the center. A worn armchair. A small table with a tea set. It felt like a room from a dream I'd forgotten I once had. I turned back to him, completely undone. Michael. He smiled. Consider it yours for however long you want it. I stepped into the center of the room and stood still, letting myself breathe it in the scent of new wood, paper, and possibility. That night, I sat in the apartment one last time with the old notebook on my lap, the final page still blank. I wrote, I was a woman who gave until I vanished. Then I became the woman who took it all back. Not with rage, not with fire, but with silence, with truth, and with the kind of strength they never saw coming. The next day, I finalized the donation. A portion of the house sale went straight to a foundation that supports women starting over, women dismissed, discarded, underestimated, just like I was. They called to thank me, but I didn't need thanks. Every time I stepped into that bookstore, into the next chapter, I remembered who I was now. Not Ethan's mother. Not Olivia's maid. Margaret Walker, woman, survivor, author of her own ending. I never needed permission to start again. Just a key. And now I had it in my hand. And this time, it didn't open someone else's door. It opened mine. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.